Hello everyone, I'm aReNGee and I'd like to welcome you all to the second episode of Stock Talk. For this episode I will be talking about Public Enemy number 1, Party Hour. Party Hour is a deck that's been on everybody's radar, whether as a salty complaint about how unfair it is or just merely as a major factor influencing their metagame choices. It sits at the top of Tier 1 and it's been rather successful for the first couple weeks, but its success has been tapering off recently as people have started to tech very heavily against it and just in general pick decks that are better against the Party Hour menace. What we have in front of us here is the Party Hour deck that I've been playing, and honestly I haven't changed it too much since I originally posted the deck list. Much to the chagrin of many players, the Levitates are still in there, and they've actually been proving quite successful with all of the Aegis units out of Arcano that have been coming up, or even some Combre lists. The core of the deck, as always, is Witching Hour, Scouting Party, and Champion of Cunning. These are your best cards, and in combination they win you more games than... well, these are the cards that win you the game, essentially. I'm running the same core removal package of Deathstrike, Feeding Time, and Annihilate, and the same card draw / sigil granting package of Levitate, Seek Power, Feln Stranger, Vara's Favor, Push Onward, and Wisdom of the Elders. That's a lot of cards, but this is a deck that has a lot of card draw and a lot of sigil search in order to enable Witching Hour as quickly as possible. The changes to the list and the interesting cards is the adoption of the 4 Feln Bloodcasters, a card that even after their change I wasn't too excited about. Feln Bloodcaster mostly does duty as a 2/5 blocker against the aggressive decks, while being a serviceable play against more mid-range decks. It can block something like a 4/4 non-deadly Champion of Chaos without worrying too much, or a slightly buffed up Arcano Outlaw. It's pretty good against the variety of 2/2s that run around because it has enough attack to threaten them on the backswing and enough health to survive their various hits. Its ultimate is mostly gravy, but sometimes you'll get up to 7 power and you won't have anything else lying around to do, and it can be good in control matchups where you need to focus on drawing cards to get to your combo. The other major adaptation I've made is 4 Lightning Storms, which actually aren't quite as good in this metagame as they were a week ago. When I first built this version, Stone Star Jito was everywhere, which is a list focusing on Frontier Jito and as many 1-drops as possible that aims to end the game as early as turn 3 or turn 4, and you essentially needed to have Lightning Storm on turn 2 if you were on the draw, or you would lose the game or very nearly on the spot. So I played the full 4 in reaction to that, but with the movement towards more tempo Combre lists and Arcano decks and more things essentially that have 3 health, Lightning Storm has come down a bit in terms of both effectiveness and how required it is to have it in your opening hand. The final interesting card that I'm playing is a Singleton Backlash, which I intended as a sort of control / mirror card. I was going to hold on to it in order to counter like Critical Witching Hour, Scouting Party, or Harsh Rule, but in terms of actual gameplay, this wasn't a very successful strategy. Party Hour is a deck that wants to power down, that is spend all its power, almost every single turn as it churns through its cards and attempts to find those, again, key cards, the champions, the Scouting Parties, and the Witching Hours. So you didn't ordinarily have the 2 power up to hold that backlash. And since you were casting your powerful cards on curve as soon as you could, you didn't wait to hold up the backlash, so it wasn't as efficient as just having a Sabotage at the same slot. It also missed against more decks, where Sabotage had its splash damage against Arcano. Backlash is essentially useless against them, and it's something that I'd look to change moving forward. Now, my list hasn't changed a large amount, but one player who's had a lot of success on ladder with Party Hour and has changed the list a fair amount is Neon. Let's take a look at his list now. Those are some spicy one-ofs and quite a few cards that definitely weren't in the original list. The one that drew my eye immediately was the 4 copies of Argenport Instigator. Now I am in the privileged position of having talked to the deck's creator, Neon, here, and I know why these are in here. He said that the most effective way to win the mirror matchups or the control matchups essentially, is to clock the opponent, and a 3/3 for 2 is a very effective way to do that. So these come down and they put on a lot of early pressure against the other Party Hour decks while dodging a large percentage of the removal. The Lightning Storms, the Plagues, the Vara's Favor. Deathstrike doesn't trade very efficiently with them, so it's a good way to threaten them, especially since it goes over top of the Feln Stranger, the deck that everybody plays. And in addition, it's also a good defensive card against the various fire decks and, you know, the smaller combo decks, or even the Stone Scar ones. It blocks all of the 2/2s and 2/1s and even the 3/2s handily while defending your life total. It is a bit of a problem with Scouting Party if you get Lightning Stormed at the wrong time when you're too low on life, but generally it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And just having such a well-costed 2-power blocker / attacker is well worth the versatility in his eyes. Another interesting card that's in there is way up at the top end. He's playing 2 copies of Black Sky Harbinger, which was sort of an interesting choice for me initially, but again, I believe is mirror tech. This is a fantastic on-curve answer to Scouting Party, as they play it on turn 5, and you play this on turn 6, clear it all, and play a threat, which is generally a better tempo play than Plague plus something else, especially since it doesn't kill your own Scouting Party if you happen to play one the turn before. It also stabilizes really well against aggro by buying you a bunch of life, and just against everything else, it's a difficult to kill lifesteal guy. So it gains you a bunch of health, it's evasive, it survives torches, you can't hit it with Vanquish, you can't kill it with Storm, you know, none of that kind of stuff. And it dodges Annihilate because it's multicolor. So it's again, much like the Argenport Instigator, it's both a good offensive card and a good defensive card, which makes it a pretty cool, versatile 6-drop. It also combos very well with Champion of Cunning, since you attack for a lot of evasive damage. Because of the 2 Argenport Instigators, Neon has been able to cut down on the Storms. He only plays the 2, and only 3 Feln Bloodcasters. I imagine the reason for the 3 Bloodcasters is that while they are effective blockers, they're not very good in multiples, and they don't draw you towards your better cards, so it's better to not have too many of them. Instead of my 3/3 split, Neon has gone with a 4/2 split favoring Wisdom of the Elders. He said that the deck, his deck specifically, just wants to draw as many sigils as possible, and so it cares a bit more about the raw card draw than the general selection, since a lot of his cards, a lot of the cards in this deck, they do the same thing. They kill stuff, they draw cards, or their units. In comparison to my 2 Annihilates, Neon has a full 3, presumably because of the dearth of multi-faction units at the moment. This can't kill a Champion of Cunning, which is a bit bad in the mirror, but he's got other ideas for the mirror. And he's not playing any of the feeding times at all. Finally, we have his 2 spicy 1-ofs. His Sabotage is in the same sort of slot as my Backlash, where it's the... well, it's the better version of my Backlash as the 1-of that's good against the mirror, good against the control decks, and also hits some splash against Rakano. Dead against less things, essentially. And he's got 1 copy of Stew of the Past, which looks weird, but I'm told that it's just a 4-drop unit that has Deadly and blocks pretty well. He felt a little bit low on 4-drops and wanted something to buff that up, and that was the best one available. Interestingly, compared to my list, he's playing the same amount of Champions, Cunning, and Scouting Parties, but only 3 Witching Hours, which seems to be the new normal, as evidenced by this list, the other Party Hour list that we have here. This one was submitted by Grincherz, who is one of the only top master players that's still on Party Hour at the moment, and he's got a more, shall we say, mainstream approach to Party Hour here, but he agrees on the 3 Witching Hour number. His list looks a lot more like-minded than Neon. Neon's got a lot of his own fancy tech in there, but he has, as his defensive properties, no Annihilates, but 3 Lightning Storms and 2 Plagues in order to deal with the early aggressive units. Evidently, he didn't want to go the full 4 Plagues since he relies more on the Strangers and Parties as his defensive units, and he felt that the Plagues were the better mirror breakers. He also went with a split of card draw in favor of push onwards. Now, Neon's deck played more like a control combo list in that he was looking for the card advantage and draw, whereas Grincherz is more looking for the perfect card for each situation and therefore wants the selection offered by push onward in favor of the wisdom, although he does play plenty of those as well. He's up the Sabotage count to 2 and the Levitate count to a full 4. Now, Neon's list with its Instigators and Harbingers and things didn't actually have any space for it, Levitate, but this list has included it probably as a response to the Aegis units for the same reason that it was included in my list. As this deck has more spell-based removal, and Neon's list prefers more blocking with units, it is more important to be able to actually remove those Aegises in this particular deck. The other interesting cards that he's playing is he's playing 1 Feeding Time, presumably just as an additional Deathstrike, or you'd see a bit more of a split there. So he wants 5 4-drop removal spells. And he's only playing 3 copies of Scouting Party. Now, Scouting Party is one of the better cards in the deck, so this surprises me a bit, and I have not actually had the opportunity to ask him if this is the number that he feels is correct, or if he simply doesn't have a 4 Scouting Party since they are not craftable at this time. The final card in his deck, it's a spicy one of, is Celestial Omen. Celestial Omen was in the initial lists as an additional, as usually just as an additional copy of Witching Hour, but has been phased out by a number of Witching Hour pilots, myself included, but has stuck around here, which again shows that this list is more has a larger focus on flexibility and being able to find the correct card at the correct time than it does on just sheer card value like Neon's list does. So these two, Grincherz's list and Neon's list, are about 12 cards different, with the most major difference being the emphasis on units in Neon's list and the emphasis on spells and selection in Grincherz's, and the rest of the changes just being minor differences in card numbers. A Storm here, a Wisdom there, a Party here. So with their two help, I was able to put together a pretty good stock list for Party Hour, and here it is here. Yes, it's got a lot of 2-ofs in it, and there's a lot of hedged numbers, but I've been able to strike down what I think is the core of the deck. You definitely want to be playing your 4 Champion of Cunnings, and I'm pretty sure that you want to be playing your 4 Scouting Parties. The best players at the moment have agreed that 3 Witching Hours is the number, and after some thought, I'm inclined to agree with them. Witching Hour is usually a card that wins you the game as soon as you can cast it. You don't usually need multiples. So having only 3 is good, as you'll find it eventually with the amount of card draw that you have in the deck, but you won't have your hand clogged up by 2 or 3 uncastable Witching Hours in the early game. 4 Deathstrikes are your only 4 drops. You need the versatile removal and the fact that their fast speed doesn't hurt. For the card draw, I went with an even split of Push Onwards and Wisdom of the Elders. Again, depending on your particular build of the deck, you can favor one or the other, but I think that you do want at least 6 draw spells in the deck, in the 3 slot. And as this is a stock list, I leave it up to you for personal preference as to which one you want to favor. 3 Feln Bloodcasters is what we went with. Again, don't need the maximum number of Bloodcasters, because they're not very good in multiples. They're not very good against the larger mid-range decks where the 5 health is not sufficient to block anything effectively. And you only really want 1 against aggro because you'd rather curve into better things later on. Full 4 Varus Favors, Feln Strangers, Seek Powers to enable yourself. And I've gone with 3 Lightning Storms here. Rakano decks are in vogue right now, but I feel that Stonescar Jito decks may make a resurgence, and I prefer the 3 Storms to the 2 Storms, although you may have a different experience as playtesting moves on. I've adapted Neon's Argenport Instigator tech into this list, the full 4. I really liked it. I thought it played quite well, and I think that it is a good adaptation to the Party Hour list to make them better in the current metagame. I also kept the 2 Annihilates in the deck and adapted the 2 Sabotage from Grincherz's list. I found that the Sabotage played a lot better than Backlash ever did, and it gives you good game against the meta. Should it ever slow down and Party Hour become more successful, while also giving you splash damage against Rakano, one of the more popular aggro decks at the moment. Finally, I've kept the 2 Levitates in. These are flex slots and you can put them in as whatever you like. Perhaps you may wish to adapt Neon's Black Sky Harbinger tech. By all means do so, but Levitates will serve you well. They shouldn't ever be dead in the Unix-centric metagame that we have right now. You'll always be able to cycle them, and you'll be able to get good value out of knocking off an Aegis on something in a number of games. False Prince is also seeing a resurgence at the moment, as Elasian players start to poke their heads out a bit. As Cambrai players step it up, the Elasian players... as Cambrai gets more prevalent in the metagame, as it moves to a more... as a less all-in and more snowball-y aggressive, the Cambrai decks step out, and that encourages the Elasian players to start playing Elasian again, in order to feed on the Cambrai decks, as Elasian usually wins that matchup, Cambrai versus Elasian. So Levitates are good there against False Prince, they're good against the Aegis that's lying around, and they're generally good cyclers. So if I had to say what the core of the deck is, everything from Vara's Favor to Witching Hour is absolutely core, as are, I think the Sigil balance is pretty much figured out for what you're playing here right now. You can tweak with a number of Lightning Storms. Try the Argenport Instigator tech. I think it's really good. You may not like it, depending on what you have there. And Annihilates, you can tweak the amounts that you have. Sabotage and Levitate are your other cards. So you do have about 10 to 12 flex slots to play with, which is more than the Rakano stock list. But if you go with this on the ladder right now, I don't think you're going to be too disappointed. The Argenport Instigator tech gives it a lot of game against decks that it struggled against before, and also helps in the Party Hour mirror. So I'm really glad that I found that, and I think this is an interesting take on Party Hour. The deck hasn't evolved too much since its initial inception, but with one new tech card and a couple of number rebalancings, I think it's ready to take on the metagame again in a field that's very hostile to it at the moment. So this has been the second episode of Stock Talk. Perhaps less interesting than the previous one, because Party Hour has been on everybody's lips so much lately, and Rakano is something of a newer breed. But hopefully you enjoyed it nonetheless. I'm looking at doing the various Cambrai flavors next. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle that, as they are distinct, but the decks tend to blend together in terms of archetypes, so it's going to be difficult, but look forward to that in the next couple days. If you have a question about anything on any of the deck lists, you can hit me up on Twitter, Discord, Reddit. You'll find me everywhere as either aReNGee or aReNGee Eternal, and I'd love to hear from you. Or if you have a suggestion for a stock talk that you'd like me to do next time. I'm always happy to see decks from top players. If you have a Diamond or Master list that you'd like to show me and get involved in my next video or article, I'd love to hear from you. For the rest of you, I hope to see you again next time with my third stock talk. Until then,